The Volanthi research vessel Gentle Dawn drifted through the endless darkness of uncharted space. Captain Lyris Venthan stood at the observation window, her 4 delicate arms wrapped around her thin body as she watched the stars. They seemed so far away now. Too far. The ship had been traveling for 17 standard cycles, far beyond the borders of the Galactic Council's mapped territories. When everything went wrong, the drive core had failed without warning. One moment, they were cruising through the void at faster than light speeds, and the next moment they were thrown back into normal space with a violent shudder that sent half the crew tumbling across the deck. The emergency lights had come on immediately, bathing everything in a sickly yellow glow that made Lyris feel even more afraid than she already was. Chief Engineer Torvash had delivered the news with trembling vocal membranes. The quantum fold generator was completely destroyed. The backup systems were fried. They had no way to travel faster than light. At their current position, they were at least 200 light-years from the nearest inhabited system. Using their sublight engines, it would take them roughly 40,000 years to reach help. Their life support would fail in 3 months. Lyris had called an emergency meeting in the main command chamber. 27 crew members gathered around the holographic display table, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with fear and despair. The Volanthi were a peaceful species. They had evolved on a gentle world with low gravity and mild temperatures. They were scientists and artists, not survivors. The very idea of being stranded in the void, so far from everything they knew, was almost too much for their sensitive minds to handle. Communications. Officer Deleth had suggested sending a distress signal. It was a desperate hope, almost laughable given their location. They were in a region of space that had never been explored. There were no relay stations, no patrol routes, nothing but empty darkness in every direction. But what choice did they have? Lyris had ordered the signal sent anyway. At least they would have tried. The SOS broadcast went out in all directions, carrying their coordinates and a desperate plea for help. It traveled at the speed of light through the cosmic void, growing weaker with every passing moment. The crew watched it go on their instruments, a tiny spark of hope shooting into infinity. Then they sat down to wait, and to pray to whatever gods might be listening. Days passed, then weeks. The crew tried to maintain their routines, but despair had settled over the ship like a heavy blanket. Some of them stopped eating. Others spent all their time in their quarters, staring at nothing. A few had begun writing final messages to families they would never see again. The young navigation assistant had attempted to end her own life, and had to be placed in medical care. Lyris forced herself to remain strong for her crew, but in private moments she wept. She thought about her children waiting for her back home. She thought about the beautiful sunset on her homeworld that she would never see again. She wondered how long it would take for her people to realize that Gentle Dawn was lost, and how many generations would pass before anyone found their frozen remains drifting through space. The ship's computer calculated that their distress signal would reach the nearest known inhabited system in approximately 18 standard years. By then, everyone on board would be long dead. Their message would arrive like a ghost story, a cry from beyond the grave. Lyris found a strange comfort in that thought. At least someone would eventually know what happened to them. On the 42nd day of their stranding, something unexpected happened. The communications array detected a response signal. At first, Deleth thought the equipment was malfunctioning. He ran diagnostics 3 times before he believed what he was seeing. Someone had heard them. Someone had answered. The crew gathered around the communications station, their hearts beating fast with a hope they had almost forgotten how to feel. The signal was strange, using frequencies and encoding patterns that were not standard Galactic Council protocols. But it was definitely a response to their SOS. Someone was coming. Deleth worked to decode the transmission. When the message finally became clear, a hush fell over the command chamber. The signal had come from a species called humans. They were from a world known as Earth. They had picked up the distress call through some kind of deep space monitoring station, and they were sending a rescue fleet. Estimated arrival time was 6 days. Lyris felt her legs go weak. 6 days, that was impossible. They were over 200 light-years from the nearest civilized system. No ship in the known galaxy could travel that fast. She asked Deleth to confirm the calculations. He did. The numbers were correct. Somehow, these humans were going to cross a distance that should have taken years in less than a week. The name sparked something in Lyris's memory. Humans, she had heard stories about them. They were a relatively new species on the galactic stage, having achieved interstellar travel only a few centuries ago. But the stories that circulated about them were disturbing. They came from a depth world, a planet so hostile and dangerous that most galactic species could not survive there for more than a few hours. Heavy gravity, extreme temperature variations, violent weather systems, predatory animals, toxic plants, diseases that attacked the body in 100 different ways. The Volanthi had always avoided contact with humans. They were considered unpredictable and potentially dangerous. Some council members had even suggested quarantining their entire solar system. And now these Deathworlders were coming to save them. Lyris did not know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Perhaps both. But as she looked at her exhausted, desperate crew, she realized that it did not matter. They were dying out here in the void. If the humans were their only chance at survival, then she would accept help from the devils themselves. She ordered the crew to prepare for rescue operations. For the first time in weeks, there was movement on the ship that was not driven by routine or despair. There was purpose. There was hope. The humans were coming, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. Deep Space Monitoring Station Omega-7 floated at the edge of human-controlled space. Its massive sensor arrays pointed outward into the unknown. Lieutenant Sarah Chen was halfway through her night shift, sipping her third cup of coffee and fighting the urge to close her eyes. Monitoring duty was usually boring. The universe was a quiet place most of the time, and the station's primary job was watching for threats that almost never came. The alert chime made her jump so hard that she spilled coffee on her console. For a moment she thought it was just a glitch, some random cosmic noise that had triggered the system. But when she pulled up the data, her blood went cold. It was a distress signal, clearly artificial, definitely not human in origin, and it was coming from a location that should have been completely empty. Sarah ran the analysis 3 times before she picked up the communication link to Earth Command. When Admiral Marcus Stone answered the call, she could hear the exhaustion in his voice. It was the middle of the night on the American East Coast, and he had clearly been sleeping. But when she explained what she had found, his voice changed. It became sharp and focused. The voice of a man who had spent 30 years preparing for moments exactly like this one. The distress signal was from a Volanthi vessel. Stone knew the name immediately. The Volanthi were one of the more peaceful species in the Galactic Council, known for their beautiful art and their advanced medical research. They had never shown any hostility toward humanity, though they had also never shown much interest in friendship either. Most of the older species viewed humans with a mixture of curiosity and fear, and the Volanthi were no exception. But none of that mattered now. There were living beings stranded in the void, dying slowly while they waited for help that would never come. Stone did not hesitate. He ordered an immediate response. Within 3 hours, the fastest ships in the human fleet had been assembled at the Proxima Centauri staging point, 5 vessels in total, each one representing the absolute peak of human engineering. The flagship was the heavy cruiser Defiant, a warship that could tear through anything the galaxy had to offer. Alongside it flew the rescue corvettes Hope and Mercy, designed specifically for emergency response operations. 2 supply ships rounded out the formation, carrying enough food, water, and medical supplies to support 1,000 refugees. Captain James Reed stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching his crew prepare for departure. They moved with smooth efficiency, each person knowing exactly what to do. Most of them were veterans of the border conflicts, the series of skirmishes that had established humanity's right to exist in galactic society. They had faced hostile species before. They had fought and bled and won. A simple rescue mission should be easy by comparison. But Reed knew better than to underestimate the dangers of deep space. The coordinates from the distress signal pointed to a region that had never been explored by any known species. There could be anything out there. Hostile aliens, dangerous anomalies, environmental hazards that nobody had ever encountered before. He ordered his crew to remain on high alert throughout the journey. The human faster-than-light drive was different from anything else in the galaxy. Most species used quantum fold technology, which bent space around a ship and allowed it to skip from one point to another. It was elegant and efficient, but it had limits. The fold equations became increasingly unstable over long distances, which was why the Volanthi had been traveling for so long before their drive failed. Humans had taken a different approach. Their drives tore holes in the fabric of space-time itself, creating temporary tunnels through dimensions that should not exist. It was violent, dangerous, and required enormous amounts of energy. The first test pilots had gone insane from the things they saw during transit, but the technology worked, and it worked faster than anything else in the known universe. The 5 ships engaged their drives simultaneously. Reality screamed around them as they punched through into the space between spaces. The journey that would have taken the Volanthi months would take the human fleet less than a week. Reed watched the transit displays and tried not to think about the costs of this technology. The drive cores were powered by zero-point energy extraction, a process that literally stole power from the vacuum of space. Some scientists believed they were slowly damaging the universe itself. Others said it did not matter, because the damage would not become apparent for billions of years. During the transit, Reed studied everything the database had on the Volanthi. They were fragile creatures by human standards, with thin bones and weak muscles adapted to their low-gravity homeworld. They breathed a specific mixture of gases that humans would find unpleasant but not deadly. Their average body temperature was lower than humans, and they required special environmental considerations. Most importantly, they were psychologically delicate. The trauma of their situation might have broken them in ways that physical injuries could not explain. Reed ordered his medical teams to prepare for psychological emergency response as well as physical treatment. He wanted counselors ready, translators prepared, and calm voices available at all times. The Volanthi had been stranded in the void for over a month, believing they were going to die. Suddenly, being rescued by a species they feared might be almost as traumatic as being stranded in the first place. On the third day of transit, a message came through from Earth Command. The Galactic Council had been informed of the rescue operation, and they were not happy about it. Several member species had filed formal complaints about humanity conducting operations in unexplored space without proper authorization. One species had even suggested that humans should be fined for reckless behavior. Reed laughed when he read the complaints. Let them fine humanity. Let them file their protests and hold their committee meetings. The Volanthi did not have time for galactic politics. They were dying out there, alone and afraid, and every hour of delay meant more suffering. Humans did not leave people behind. That was not how they were built. The response from Earth Command was simple. Rescue operation proceeds as planned. All complaints will be addressed after survivors are safe. Reed felt a surge of pride. This was why he had joined the fleet. This was what it meant to be human. On the fifth day, the fleet dropped out of transit at the coordinates from the distress signal. The Volanthi ship appeared on sensors immediately, a small scientific vessel drifting without power. It looked fragile and broken against the backdrop of stars. Reed ordered his ships to approach slowly, broadcasting peaceful intentions on all frequencies. The response came almost immediately. A voice, thin and trembling but unmistakably relieved, speaking through the universal translator. The captain of the Gentle Dawn welcomed them and thanked them for coming. She sounded like she could not believe what was happening. Reed smiled and opened a channel. Help had arrived. The humans were here, and they were not leaving until everyone was safe. The first human shuttle docked with the Gentle Dawn with a soft clank that echoed through the damaged vessel. Captain Lyris waited at the airlock with her senior officers, her heart beating so fast that she felt dizzy. She had spent hours preparing herself for this moment, trying to imagine what the Deathworlders would look like in person. Nothing could have prepared her for the reality. The airlock door slid open, and 3 humans stepped through. They were massive by Volanthi standards, each one standing nearly a full body length taller than the tallest crew member. Their bodies were thick and heavy, built from dense muscle and solid bone. They moved with a controlled power that made Lyris think of predators stalking through grass. Their eyes scanned the corridor with sharp attention, missing nothing. The lead human was a female named Dr. Elena Martinez. According to the briefing data, she wore a simple jumpsuit and carried a medical bag, but there was nothing simple about her presence. She radiated confidence and calm authority, as if walking onto a crippled alien vessel in the middle of nowhere was something she did every day. Behind her came 2 male humans in military uniforms, their hands resting casually near weapons that looked powerful enough to punch through bulkheads. Lyris stepped forward, forcing her trembling legs to support her. She raised her upper arms in the traditional Volanthi greeting of peace. The human doctor responded with a gesture that the translator identified as a smile. Though it looked strange and slightly frightening on her blunt-featured face, Dr. Martinez spoke slowly and clearly, and the translator converted her words into perfect Volanthi. She introduced herself and her team, explained that they were here to help, and asked permission to begin assessing the crew's medical condition. There was no judgment in her voice, no contempt for the fragile aliens who had gotten themselves stranded in deep space, just professional concern and genuine warmth. Lyris granted permission, and the humans went to work. Over the next several hours, more shuttles arrived from the fleet. Medical teams spread through the ship, checking every crew member for injuries and illnesses. Engineers in heavy suits crawled through maintenance tunnels that Velament workers would have needed gravity assistance to enter. Technicians set up emergency power systems and life support boosters that would keep the ship livable while permanent repairs were made. The Volanthi crew watched the humans work with a mixture of awe and disbelief. These Deathworlders moved through their ship like it was designed for them, like the corridors and compartments were comfortable rather than cramped. They carried equipment that would have required multiple Volanthi working together to lift. They worked in temperatures that the Volanthi found uncomfortably hot without showing any signs of distress. Young navigator, Peleth found herself assigned to guide a pair of human engineers through the lower decks. She was terrified at first, convinced that the massive creatures would accidentally crush her with a careless movement. But the humans were surprisingly gentle, careful to watch their steps and keep their powerful limbs under control. One of them even apologized when he accidentally brushed against her in a narrow passage. She found the courage to ask them questions as they worked. How had they arrived so quickly? The engineer, a cheerful man named Rodriguez, explained about the human faster-than-light drive. Peleth listened with growing amazement. The technology he described should not have been possible according to everything she had learned. But here they were, proof that humans could do things other species could not even imagine. In the medical bay, Dr. Martinez examined Captain Lyris personally. The Volanthi leader was suffering from exhaustion, malnutrition, and the early stages of several stress-related conditions. Her body had been slowly breaking down under the weight of responsibility and despair. Martinez administered treatment with gentle efficiency, explaining each step and making sure Lyris understood what was happening. During the examination, Lyris asked the question that had been burning in her mind since the humans arrived. Why had they come? The Volanthi had no alliance with humanity. They had never offered friendship or support. Some of her people had even argued against allowing humans into galactic society. Why would the Deathworlders risk their ships and their lives for strangers who had shown them nothing but coldness? Martinez paused in her work. She seemed to consider the question carefully before answering. She said that humans did not rescue people because they expected something in return. They did it because leaving someone to die when you could save them was wrong. Simple as that. Every human child learned this basic truth before they could walk. You help people who need help. You protect people who cannot protect themselves. That was what it meant to be human. Lyris felt something shift inside her chest. She had spent her entire life among species that calculated every interaction, that weighed costs and benefits before extending any aid. The idea that someone would come hundreds of light years just because it was the right thing to do was almost impossible to understand. But looking into the human doctor's eyes, she believed it. Captain Reed came aboard the Gentle Dawn late in the first day of rescue operations. He was an even more imposing figure than the others, with gray streaks in his dark hair and scars on his hands that spoke of past battles. But when he spoke to the Volanthi crew, his voice was kind. He explained the rescue plan in simple terms. The human fleet would stay as long as necessary to make repairs. If the Gentle Dawn could not be saved, they would transfer everyone to the human ships and carry them home. No one would be left behind. The crew gathered in the main hall to hear his words, and for the first time in weeks there were no tears of despair. Some of them wept anyway, but these were tears of relief and gratitude. The humans had crossed the void to save them. The Deathworlders had shown more compassion than species the Volanthi had known for thousands of years. That night, as the human crews continued their tireless work, Lyris sat alone in her quarters and composed a message to the Galactic Council. She described everything she had witnessed, every act of kindness and competence the humans had displayed. She wrote that she had been wrong about them. Her entire species had been wrong. The Deathworlders were not monsters to be feared. They were protectors, guardians, the kind of allies that every species should want at their side. She did not know if the council would believe her. She did not know if it would change anything. But she knew that she would spend the rest of her life telling this story to anyone who would listen. The humans had saved her people from the void. That debt could never be repaid, but it would never be forgotten either. The third day of rescue operations brought a new crisis. Long-range sensors aboard the Defiant detected multiple contacts approaching from the galactic core, moving at speeds that indicated faster than light travel. Captain Reed studied the readings with a frown that made his crew nervous. The contacts did not match any known signatures in the human database. They were unknown. And unknown in deep space usually meant dangerous. Chief Engineer Torvash had been working alongside the human repair teams when the alarm sounded. He watched the humans react with practiced efficiency, their movements becoming sharper and more purposeful without any obvious signal. Within minutes, the repair crews had armed themselves and taken up defensive positions. Throughout the Gentle Dawn, the friendly technicians transformed into soldiers so quickly that it made his thin blood run cold. Captain Reed called an emergency meeting with Captain Lyris in the command chamber. He explained the situation calmly but did not try to hide the seriousness. Unknown vessels were approaching, and they would arrive within hours. The human fleet was prepared to fight if necessary, but fighting in deep space while protecting a crippled vessel would be extremely dangerous. He asked Lyris if the Volanthi had any information about hostile species in this region. Lyris shared everything she knew, which was very little. This space had never been explored because it was considered worthless. No habitable planets, no valuable resources, nothing worth the risk of venturing so far from civilized space. But absence of information did not mean absence of danger. Something lived out here, and that something was coming. The human fleet reconfigured itself around the Gentle Dawn. The Defiant took point position, its weapons charged and ready. The rescue corvettes Hope and Mercy moved to flanking positions, prepared to intercept any threats that tried to approach from the sides. The supply ships retreated behind the formation, their minimal armament useless in a real fight. The humans operated as a single unit, their coordination so precise that it seemed almost supernatural to the watching. Volanthi Reed ordered the Gentle Dawn crew to shelter in the most protected sections of their ship. Human marines would guard every access point, ready to repel boarders if the enemy got that close. Lyris wanted to protest, to insist that she and her crew could help somehow. But looking at the grim-faced soldiers checking their weapons, she realized that she would only be in the way. The Volanthi had no combat training. They would be liabilities in a fight. The unknown contacts dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of sensor range. There were 7 vessels, each one roughly the size of the Defiant, but built along completely different lines. They looked organic somehow, with curved hulls and protruding structures that resembled fins or tentacles. No transmissions came from them, no attempted communication. They simply began moving toward the human formation in a spreading pattern that suggested attack. Reed opened a channel and broadcast a warning. This is the Earth vessel Defiant. We are conducting a rescue operation. We have no hostile intentions. Please identify yourselves and state your purpose. The words went out across all frequencies and were met with silence. The unknown ships continued their approach. The first shot came without warning. A beam of brilliant green light lanced from the lead alien vessel and struck the Defiant's forward shields. The ship shuddered but held, its defensive systems absorbing the impact. Reed felt a cold anger settle in his chest. They had tried to be peaceful. They had given the enemy every chance to talk. Now the decision was made. The human fleet opened fire. The Defiant's main batteries unleashed a devastating barrage that turned space into a storm of destructive energy. The corvettes added their own weapons to the assault, targeting the flanking enemy vessels with precision strikes. The aliens had superior numbers, but they clearly had not expected this level of resistance. 2 of their ships were destroyed in the first exchange, torn apart by weapons that had been designed to fight and win against any threat. The battle became a swirling chaos of energy beams, missile tracks, and desperate maneuvers. The alien ships were fast and agile, but the humans were better. Years of conflict had honed their tactics to a razor edge. They fought as a team, covering each other, coordinating their fire, exploiting every weakness in the enemy formation. When one alien vessel tried to break through toward the gentle dawn, all 3 combat ships concentrated their fire and reduced it to expanding debris. Aboard the Valanthi vessel, the crew huddled in the shelter areas and listened to the thunder of the battle through the hull. Some of them prayed. Others simply held each other, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with fear. Navigator Peleth found herself sitting next to a human marine who had been assigned to guard their section. He was a young man with kind eyes and hands that never stopped checking his weapon. She asked him if they were going to survive. He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. He said that his captain had promised to get them home safe, and his captain never broke promises. The aliens out there were strong, but humans were stronger. She just had to trust them. Outside, the battle reached its turning point. 4 alien vessels remained, and they had finally realized they were losing. They attempted to retreat, but Reed was not feeling merciful. His ship had been attacked without provocation. His rescue mission had been interrupted. People under his protection had been endangered. He ordered pursuit. The Defiant ran down the fleeing aliens one by one. Its engines burned hot as it pushed itself to maximum speed, closing the distance with relentless determination. The aliens tried to fight back, tried to escape, tried everything in their power to survive. Nothing worked. The human warship was faster, stronger, and commanded by a crew that would not accept failure. When the last alien vessel exploded in a flash of white light, a cheer went up across the human fleet. Reed silenced it with a raised hand. There was nothing to celebrate here. Unknown aliens had attacked them without warning, and now they were all dead. That meant questions that might never be answered. It meant potential threats that could not be evaluated. It meant complications that would echo through galactic politics for years, but for now the immediate danger was over. The Valanthi was safe. The rescue mission could continue. Reed ordered his ships to resume their positions around the gentle dawn and sent a damage report request to all vessels. The fight had cost them, but they had won. That was all that mattered. The journey home took 12 days. The human engineers had worked miracles on the gentle dawn, patching systems that Valanthi technology could not have repaired in months. The ship was not perfect, but it was functional enough to travel under its own power with the human fleet escorting it. Captain Lyris stood on her bridge and watched the stars flow past, her heart filled with emotions she could not name. During the journey, the 2 crews learned to live together. Human soldiers and technicians walked the corridors of the Valanthi vessel as if they belonged there. They shared meals with their alien hosts, learned fragments of each other's languages, and exchanged stories about their homeworlds. The Valanthi discovered that the Deathworlders could be gentle when they chose to be. The humans discovered that the fragile aliens possessed courage and dignity that deserved respect. Navigator Peleth became close friends with the young Marine who had guarded her during the battle. His name was Marcus, and he came from a place called Texas that sounded wild and beautiful when he described it. He taught her human card games and listened patiently while she explained Valanthi poetry. When she asked why humans were so different from other species, he thought for a long time before answering. He said that Earth was a hard world that forced his ancestors to become hard people. They had to be strong to survive the predators and the diseases and the natural disasters, but hardness alone was not enough. They also had to be kind to each other, to work together, to protect the weak and care for the sick. That combination of strength and compassion had shaped humanity into what it was today. They could fight like demons when they had to, but they would rather help strangers and make friends. Captain Reed met with Captain Lyris every evening to discuss the day's progress and share intelligence about the unknown aliens. Analysis of the battle wreckage had revealed disturbing information. The alien vessels used technology that was completely unfamiliar to human scientists. Their weapons operated on principles that seemed to violate known physics. Their biological samples showed a species that had evolved in conditions even more hostile than Earth. Wherever these creatures came from, they were not going to be easy to deal with. Reed shared his concerns openly with Lyris. The attack suggested that there were threats in deep space that the Galactic Council had never encountered. Threats that were aggressive, advanced, and willing to kill without warning. That humans would investigate further once the rescue mission was complete, but it might be years before they understood what they had faced. In the meantime, Reed recommended that all species increase their deep space monitoring capabilities and be prepared for possible conflict. Lyris listened and found herself agreeing. The comfortable assumptions of galactic civilization had been challenged. The void was not empty, and what lived in it was not friendly. The only reason her crew had survived was because the Deathworlders had come to their rescue. Without humanity's strength and speed, the Gentle Dawn would have been destroyed by those alien attackers. Her people owed their lives to the very species they had once feared. The fleet reached Valanthi space on the 10th day. A welcoming committee was already assembled. Dozens of vessels from various council species gathering to witness the return of the lost ship. The news of the rescue had spread across the galaxy, and everyone wanted to see the humans who had accomplished the impossible. Some came out of genuine interest. Others came to gather intelligence on humanity's capabilities. A few came hoping to find evidence of misconduct that could be used against the Deathworlders in council proceedings. They found nothing but heroes. The Valanthi crew emerged from their ship healthy and grateful, singing praises of their human saviors. They told stories of kindness and competence, of gentle hands and tireless work, of soldiers who fought like warriors and entreated their wounded enemies with respect. They described the battle against the unknown aliens, the way the human fleet had protected them without hesitation, the sacrifice and skill that had turned certain death into survival. The Galactic Council held an emergency session to discuss the implications of the rescue. Representatives from 100 species listened as Captain Lyris delivered her official report. She spoke for 3 hours, describing every detail of her ordeal and her salvation. When she finished, she made a formal request that the Valanthi Confederacy seek a full alliance with the Human Federation. The chamber erupted in chaos. Some species supported the proposal. Others condemned it as dangerous and reckless. Ancient powers who had guided galactic affairs for thousands of years found themselves uncertain about how to respond. The humans had demonstrated capabilities that changed everything. Their faster-than-light technology was superior to anything else known. Their military prowess was terrifying. Their willingness to risk themselves for strangers was unprecedented. Captain Reed addressed the council at the end of the session. He stood before the assembled representatives without apparent nervousness. His scarred hands clasped behind his back. He thanked them for their attention and explained that humanity had no desire for conflict with any peaceful species. They had come to the galaxy seeking friendship and cooperation. They would defend themselves if attacked, but they would rather build than destroy. He made a simple offer. Any species that found itself in need of help could call upon humanity. It did not matter if they were allies or strangers. It did not matter if they had treated humans well or poorly in the past. When people were dying and needed rescue, humans would come. That was their promise to the galaxy. That was who they were. The session ended without a formal vote, but everyone knew that something fundamental had changed. The old order of galactic politics, based on careful calculations and mutual suspicion, had been challenged by a species that operated on different principles. Humanity offered something that no other power had ever provided: unconditional help, genuine protection. The strength of Deathworlders combined with the compassion of angels. 6 months later, the Valanthi Confederacy signed a full alliance treaty with the Human Federation. It was the first of many. Over the following years, species after species sought closer ties with humanity, drawn by the same qualities that had saved the crew of the Gentle Dawn. The galaxy was changing, and the Deathworlders were leading the transformation. Captain Lyris retired from active service to become an ambassador, dedicating her remaining years to building bridges between her people and their human friends. She never forgot the day when her desperate SOS had reached across the void and found an answer. She never stopped being grateful for the fleet that had come to save her when all hope was lost. And whenever young Valanthi asked her about humanity, she told them the truth. They were strong beyond measure and kind beyond expectation. They were the protectors that every species secretly wished they had. They were the Deathworlders who had proven that the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy could also be the most gentle. And they were exactly the friends that the Valanthi needed at their side as the universe grew darker and more dangerous. The void was vast and full of terrors. But with humanity watching over them, the peoples of the galaxy had found something they had never known before. They had found hope.